everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and we've got a new sew along today. So thank you for joining me for another Sunday sew along. We're going to be doing a pencil skirt in this next little series. I'm not entirely sure how many videos that's going to break out into because I filmed this live basically. So you're kind of going through the process with me as I go through it. So I've not made the pencil skirt yet. Come here. Sorry, my business partner is being a little lazy this morning. Come on. There we go. Gidget says hi. I feel like the evil genius or whatever, like in the James Bond movies, or even like Austin Powers with the cat like sitting next to him in the big chair. All right, so we're going to be doing a pencil skirt, and like I mentioned, we're going to be doing some couture techniques with it, just because I don't sew couture hardly at all, really. But it is fun to dig into one of those kind of projects every now and again, and a pencil skirt is a really easy one to do because it does not take as long as, say, you know, a French jacket or, you know, a dress or any of that kind of thing. So number one, it's much easier to fit, and number two, you just have less things that you have to do. There's not as much fabric and not as many techniques and that kind of thing for a pencil skirt. So I'm going to be using a pencil skirt for that. Now, sorry. I am using pattern New Look 6217, and I've got it here in my pile somewhere, but I'll just pop a picture up here, which is obviously a wardrobe pattern. Now, this was a pattern I had in my stash, and there's actually been a lot of love for the top in this pattern on Instagram. A lot of seamstresses have made it up, and I'm actually really anxious to try out. I've seen quite a few of the little jacket as well. It could be, I mean, this whole pattern would be great to do a capsule wardrobe. Like, you could definitely do a module just by changing the top up. You could do some different things to the top to make it different, to have 3 different variations. And then you've got your 2 bottoms and your topper. So anyway, if you don't have this pattern yet in your stash, it could definitely be one to grab. Now, the reason I grabbed it is a pencil skirt. I may lengthen it. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to decide when I make the muslin. But I really like that it sits an inch below the waist, number one. Number two, it doesn't have a waistband. Although if you've got a pencil skirt pattern that has a waistband, just omit it. Because I'm going to show you how to do, or you can use it, I mean, do what you want. But I'm going to be showing you how to use Petersham ribbon as a waist facing, or as a facing for the inside of the skirt, instead of any other kind of facings. And actually this pattern comes with a piece for a waist day using a ribbon. Now this pattern is not lined, but I will be lining mine, which is actually very easy. It's just you're cutting out the pattern pieces out of lining, just like you are the fabric. Let's see, we'll be underlining the skirt with silk organza, and I'll be talking about all the tools that I will be using as we go about doing the skirt. I think this skirt has a side slit for walking ease. You could very easily move that to the back seam. Now the front and the back are both cut on the fold on this pattern. It would just be a matter of adding seam allowances to that back piece and cutting out 2, and then just moving your zipper. I mean, you could still put your zipper on the side, I guess, but I would put my zipper in the back along with a back split, or you could get really crazy and draft a vent if you wanted to. Not doing that. And actually, I think I'm going to keep the vent on the side, the split, not the vent, the split on the side, just because I think that's kind of fun. So I'm going to make the muslin as is and see how I feel about it before I cut into the good stuff, because again, I think I might lengthen it to hit mid-knee. Or either that or like right below my knee, maybe, because I want it just a little bit longer for some drama, but we'll see. So basically that is the pattern I'm using, but any any pencil skirt pattern will work for this sew along. Another thing I want to note about this pattern, there are no front darts. That's the other reason I decided to choose this one. If you have a large hip to waist ratio, and if you're making a skirt that does sit at your natural waist, you probably do want those front darts. I'm very straight through my hips and waist. I don't need the front darts, and I often omit them just because there's just not much measurement difference between, especially in the front of my body, from my waist to my hips. Now, everyone needs the darts in the back. Everyone's butt protrudes, even if you claim you've got the flattest butt in the world, it still protrudes a little bit. So you still need those darts, just maybe not as much as someone with a sway back, for instance, which I do have a small bit of I have a slight sway back. Nothing too major, but I do have a little bit of one. And anyway, so I'll be keeping the back darts, but again, I probably would have omitted the front darts anyway, so this pattern doesn't even have any, so I don't have to worry about that. So that is what I am going to be working with. Now let's talk about supplies for making your, I'm going to use couture very loosely here. I'm not going to be going full hog couture, although I will be using quite a few techniques. These are all techniques that I've learned from Susan Kalgi, Claire Schaefer, and also Helen Hoey. Claire no longer teaches. She's retired from that, so she's got two gals actually that I know that have taken over her teaching her classes. And that's really fun. Actually, I've taken classes from them at our professional conference as well. And then I have taken in-person, although I was able to take an in-person class with Claire before she retired. And then I've taken an in-person class with Susan Kalgi, a 2-day in-person class with her, and I've taken in-person classes with Helen Hoey as well. Not to mention BluPrint Classes. Susan and Helen both have BluPrint Classes as well online. So, yeah, these are just kind of me sharing what I've learned. Again, I don't sew a lot of couture, but it's kind of fun to have those in your toolbox and to pull those out every now and again. All right, let's talk about fabric. For my pencil skirt, I'm going to be using this gorgeous brocade that literally has all the colors of the rainbow in it. I think I have about a yard of it, and it's not very wide. This is my selvage to selvage. You can't really see that, can you? It's probably only 40 inches wide, but I'm very confident I can get a pencil skirt out of it. But look at that. I just think it's going to make such a cool pencil skirt that I could dress up or down. It's going to definitely be a statement piece, but so that makes it fun to do couture techniques when it's something like that. That's going to be pretty special. But yeah, you can literally wear any color with that. So that is the fabric I'm going to be using. Oops. It's getting caught on my equipment here. And then for my lining, I'm going to be using this China silk in this bright blue color. I have a ton of it. This came from Joyce's stash too, but I like how it pulls out that blue. There's blue and purple in there, but it pulls out that blue. China silk is just a really lightweight, I mean, you can see through that. Yeah. It's a really lightweight silk. And this is 100% silk, but it makes a great lining. And I don't want anything too heavy because this is going to be a heavy skirt. And then I've got my silk organza. Hold on, I've got stuff sitting on top of it. I don't want to have a avalanche here. Silk organza is like impossible to fold. But I have a whole bunch of silk organza, and so I'm going to be underlining my skirt with this. So I'm actually going to be, we'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit, but this is what I'm going to cut my pattern and stuff out of, and then I will mount it to the brocade. But this is going to help keep the brocade from stretching out. Underlining, so it keeps its shape. It's not going to wrinkle. It's not going to get bagged out or stretched out. Number one. Number two, underlining, especially a pencil skirt, it gives you something to sew your hems and stuff to, so that you're not, it makes sewing invisible hems and that kind of thing really easy. So yeah, I'm going to be using the silk organza. I'm going to leave links to the tools. Obviously the fabric came from Joyce's stash, so I can't leave a link to that. But I bought this Dharma Trading Company. You can get silk organza because it's all dye ready. They do a lot of dyeing and that kind of thing with Dharma. But you can get really good price on, or you used to be able to. I'll check. And they also have China silk in colors as well as white. And silk charmeuse, which is also a great lining. And maybe even some crepe de chine. They also have rayon. They're like ready to dye rayon in white. I mean, it's just great for lining and underlining and that kind of thing. So I'll leave a link to that down below. All right. For the actual sewing practices, clearly I will have my iron and my sewing machine that I'll be using. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to use my serger. I might, just because the brocade is very sheddy. In fact, I probably definitely will use my serger, but you can very easily just use a zigzag stitch or pinking shears if you wanted to. Just be aware if you've got fabric that sheds a lot, which this brocade does. So for marking my pattern, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, my pattern consists of two pieces, a front and a back, and that is it. There was also a waistay, and you might have facings that go with your pattern. We're not going to use those because I'm going to show you how to make a facing with Petersham ribbon. So basically you just need the front of the skirt and the back of the skirt. Your skirt might have two back pieces if it's got the zipper closure in the back, or it may just have a front and a back if the zipper closure is in the side, which actually for a pencil skirt, I prefer having a zipper closure on the side, especially if it's a invisible zipper, because I find if an invisible zipper in a pencil skirt is in the back, it's different if you do a lapped zipper or something, but an invisible zipper, because when you sit, the stress on that seam, it will pull it apart and it will not be invisible no matter how well you sew that zipper in, because it just pulls the fabric. It's just the nature of an invisible zipper, and when you sit, you put strain on those seams. So I do prefer a side zip in my pencil skirts if I'm going invisible zipper. Again, if you're doing a lapped zipper, or even just a regular zipper, like a slot zipper, you can put it in the back and it's fine. You don't notice any difference. Or even an exposed zipper actually would be fine in the back. Okay, so for my pattern, I'm going to go around and I'm going to mark the seam allowances on all sides and the hem allowance, because I'm actually not going to use the seam allowances on the pattern. I'm going to cut bigger seam allowances, and I'm actually just going to go very loosey-goosey with it, because I'm going to draw out the seam allowances on my pattern, and then I'm going to go over with some tracing paper. This is wax tracing paper. I'll see if I can find some online. I'm trying to remember where I even got mine. I bought it online, but I've had it for a really long time. I mean, this stuff lasts forever. But it comes usually in yellow, blue, white, and red. I only have red and white. Those are just the two colors I use the most. White fades really easily, and red can bleed through. You want to be careful. But again, I don't care if it bleeds through the organza, obviously, because that'll be just the underlining, and I think my brocade's thick enough, it should not be a problem. So I'm going to use red. And in conjunction with that, you're going to want a tracing wheel that has the little, yeah, there you go, the little prickly things. So the spikes on it, not some of the tracing wheels are just like a disc. You want the spikes, it works a little bit better. So this has been well loved, this wax paper here, but I think it's still good. So we'll use it until it's not anymore. But yes, I'm going to be using this, and I'll show you guys how I'm doing all of this at the cutting table. But yeah, you'll want some wax paper. You can use carbon paper or tracing paper, but I just find that the wax just stays better and it's easier to use. So that's my preference. Then you're going to need some Petersham ribbon. I'm going very colorful with this skirt. This is just some stuff I had in my stash. This is a 7/8 inch wide Petersham. It is a cotton rayon blend. What makes Petersham different from grosgrain is that it has got the scalloped, let me cover it up so you can't see it at all. The scalloped edge, I don't know if it's gonna focus on that. There we go. So it's got the scalloped edge on either side, so it's not rigid like grosgrain ribbon. So we're going to shape this for the waist when we put it in, and that helps with that because the little scallops allow one side to get shorter than the other, so you can press in a curve and then sews in really nice. So Petersham ribbon, and I like a good rayon cotton blend. So that is, I was using this also for my Vogue jacket that I did. That still needs to go to the cleaners for professional press, but someone had said that Pacific Trimming, I think, which is a store in New York, but they've got a website, has a whole bunch of Petersham in different widths and colors. So I will look, and if I can find, I'll link that down below as well. But you can find this kind of stuff on Etsy, just searching for cotton rayon Petersham ribbon. All right, finally, you're gonna want basting thread. So we're gonna be doing some hand basting. So this is Japanese cotton. I got this again in a Claire Schaefer class. It's pretty thick. It works well because it's easy to break when you're pulling it out. It just pulls out really easily and it's easy to see. Or you can go old school. This is actually not completely silk thread. This is cotton thread that is wrapped in silk. But silk thread does pull out really easily when you're using it for hand basting. So that's, I mean, definitely that's all of the couturiers use the silk thread. Another thing for silk thread, because it's really hard to find anymore, like 100% silk thread. If you're at any flea markets, that used to be in everyone's sewing box. So thread does rot, but If you're just using it for basting, where you're gonna be pulling it right back out, you're probably fine. So I would definitely search flea markets, thrift stores, garage sales, whatever, for silk thread, because that is definitely something that even if it is rotten, it's not like it's holding the garment together. It's just there temporarily. So that's a great resource for silk thread. Again, this is Metler, but it's cotton thread that's wrapped in silk, so you can find some of that occasionally as well. And I don't know, I'll link what I can find silk thread wise. I'm sure you can find on Etsy some of the Japanese cotton basting thread, but you know, the silk works just as well. Okay, finally, and then you're gonna want a nice long hand sewing needle. The longer the needle, the easier it is, because you'll be doing long running stitches for your basting stitches. Finally, you're gonna want some cotton of some sort to do your muslin. I actually grabbed this out of Joyce's stash. There's literally, oh my God, I got an entire bolt of cotton here, but I'm gonna use this for muslins. So you want some nice cotton or muslin, or bed sheets are great for muslins. If you thrift any old bed sheets, or even just your own old bed sheets that have worn out, works great for muslins. So I'm gonna be making my muslin out of this. So yeah, that is everything you're gonna need. So let's get started. I'm gonna take you over to the cutting table, and I think I've got a new setup that kind of works a little bit better. And we are going to get our muslin cut out, and then we will talk about fit, and then we will start cutting out our skirt, which is gonna take, it's gonna take longer to prep and cut out the skirt than it probably will take to actually sew it up. So other than the hand sewing that you're gonna have to do. So anyway, let's go get started. Hi. Okay, we're gonna try this setup here. All right, so like I mentioned, my pattern comes with a front and a back, and it wants me to cut both on the fold. And that is for a side seam slit for ease of walking. So I'm going to actually just leave those as is. Okay, for my size, I'm going to cut out a 16. This is New Look. Now, my hip measurement is a 39, and on the pattern, and honestly, I usually just go by finished measurements. So the finished measurement for a size, I think a 14 had you at a 38-inch hip, and a 16 had you at a 40-inch hip. Now I'm a 39, so I'm in between those two sizes. A 14 gives me a finished hip of 40.5, which is just 1.5 inches of ease, whereas a 16 gives me 42.5, which would be 3.5 inches of ease, which is too much. So I'm going to cut a 16, which I'd rather have too much ease, and then we will fit with the muslin as we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around, and I'm going to, on both my pieces here, I'm going to mark in my seam allowance, which is on this pattern 5/8 of an inch on my side seam, but my waist seam here is just 3/8 of an inch. So you got to note if you have a difference there. And then I'm going to mark in my hem allowance, which is 1 1/4. So I'm going to go around both my pieces and do that real quick. Now that I've marked these in, we're not going to cut on these lines. We're going to cut on the regular cut lines, but these are going to help me when I am putting in my seam allowances for, my sewing lines for on my silk organza before we cut out our fashion fabric. So that's just a good thing to do. So now I'm just going to go around and I'm going to cut out the size 16 just on the cut lines that come with the pattern. I'm going to do that real quick, and then we will make up a muslin. Okay, so now our pattern is prepped and ready for all of the sewing we're gonna do. So I am going to just off camera cut this out of muslin real quick, out of some cotton, and I'm just gonna sew it up with a long basting stitch. You know, sew in my darts in the back, and then I'm actually gonna sew some twill tape that I've got into the waistline just so it doesn't stretch out, so I can get a real feel for how the fit is gonna be at that point. So yeah, I'm gonna do that real quick, and then when I come back, I'll have that muslin made up and we can talk about fit. All right, so I've got my muslin made up and I have it pinned here on the side. I want my side zip to be in the side, and I've actually left the length alone. So this is the hem of the skirt that's just dangling down, and I kind of held it up a little bit, and I think that that 1.25 inch folded up is gonna should put it right mid-knee. But of course I can play around with that a little bit, maybe do like a 2-inch hem instead of a 1.25 inch hem, if I want to go just right above my knee, but I can kind of play with that. So I think I'm going to leave the length alone on this. Now it fits fantastic in the waist. It's very comfortable, so I'm going to leave that as is. Now it should be sitting 1 inch below my waist. Your waist is usually about 1/4 inch above your belly button, generally speaking. Now there's a 3/8 inch seam allowance here that will actually, you know, obviously be folded under. So that's hitting right about 1 inch below my waist, which is where it's supposed to hit. I think that the back, you guys can see that, is fitting fantastic. The darts are just great. I do have way too much ease in the hips. And actually, I think what I'm gonna do, so I'm getting poked with a pin rather aggressively here. I think what I'm gonna do is starting about here, so I don't have much curve to my hip, so it's usually right where the hip curve starts on a pattern. I'm just gonna fold out and I'm gonna pin that out, and I'm gonna take that out all the way down because that will also peg my skirt just a little bit, so that it's not so straight, which is also kind of what I want. Because of the slit, I can peg it a little bit and still have room to walk because it's got the side slit that is right there. Right there. So I think, and this is pegged a little, so I think I'm just gonna go and take out, starting here at this point of my hip, and I'm gonna pin this out, probably just, well, I could do it on both sides. Pin it out on both sides, and again, I'm gonna leave the length because once that is hemmed, I think it's gonna be about perfect, which is funny because on the model on the front of the pattern, it's like a mini skirt. So there we are, shorties unite, which is why I think I need to peg maybe a little bit more at the hem, especially because I have the side seam. So I'm gonna pin that out real quick and then show you, oh, sorry, the differences. All right, so I have it pinned on both sides all the way down, and I am gonna peg it, I think more at the bottom. Again, the hem will be shorter, 1.25 inches to 2 inches shorter than what it is falling there. Again, I'm not as concerned about that. I can fit that on the fly. So I'm keeping it the same at the hip or the waist area, and kind of through this area, and then I'm going to peg, and you can kind of see if I lay it back at those pin lines. So now, transferring, you also want to make sure, bend and sit, make sure that you can still move. You don't want to take too much ease out. You do want to leave some. General rule of thumb, you want at least about 2 inches of ease usually in your hips for comfortable sitting, especially I'm going to be in something very restrictive like the brocade lined in or underlined with the silk organza. There's going to be no give. So you do want to be very wary about that. So again, I'm starting right about here on my hips, and I'm just taking it in, and I am taking out more out of the hem as I go down so that it's not quite as straight. Okay, making these changes to the pattern. Another thing you're going to want, sorry, jumping around, I'm going to show you guys some books here at the end that are good fitting books, but you're going to want to make sure things are balanced. So if you have an extreme sway back where the backs of your skirts are shorter than the front of your skirt, you're going to want, there's things that you can do to balance that out. And the books I'm going to show you are fantastic. There's also some BluPrint Classes, Craftsy BluPrint, whatever you want to call it, that are really good for that too. I'm very pleased with how my hem is lying. And again, I like the way that this is fitting over my butt, the darts. So again, there's 100 different fitting issues that one could have. There's ways you can do full butt adjustments if you have a more protruding rear end. You know, I will show you some good sources of where you can find that kind of thing. So anyway, I'm just going to go back to the pattern, and I'm going to take off my skirt, and I'm going to measure how much I've pinched out. Now remember, when I measure, I need to double it because I've taken the same out of the front and the back at that point. So I'm just going to measure everything I've pinned out from, you know, the spot and all the way down. And if they're different, you know, if I've taken out, I don't know, 1/2 of an inch on one side and like 3/4 of an inch on the other, I'll split the difference and just take 5/8 out of both sides. Because you want equal amounts taken out of both sides of the skirt. And then I am going to peg it at the bottom. So, I mean, I'm taking a good, I think 2 inches, maybe 3 inches out of the each side of the hem, just so it'll be pegged, which won't be an issue because there will be the slit there at the end, so I'll be able to walk. But you do want to make sure you can walk and move easily. And I may actually raise the slit just a hair because I'm short, just to give me more walking ease. Okay, so I'm just going to make those adjustments to my pattern, and then, yeah, we'll meet back at the cutting table, and I will show you what I've done to the pattern, and which will be very, you know, simple, straightforward. And then we're going to cut out our silk organza and make all of our pattern notations and that kind of stuff onto our silk organza. So there we go. I'm pretty happy with this. All right, so my pattern. Now I have marked new lines, so I ended up taking 5/8 of an inch out, so I guess a total of 1.25 inches total off each side. So someone had said that this skirt came up big. Yes, it does. But again, it fit fine at the waist, although that's my thicker part of my body. But yes, I've taken it off 5/8 of an inch right here at the hip curve, left it the same as is. And then I've taken 1.25 inches off each side of the hem to peg it. Now, if you decide, pegging means where it gets slim at your knee, which really creates that kind of the sexier wiggle effect, kind of. But again, I have the side split, so I should have walking ease. Now, if you peg your skirt, you're going to need to mark your hem allowance. I've marked 1.25 inches here. I may take it up 2 inches, and I've checked if I do 2 inches, I'm still fine. But mark your hem allowance, fold the pattern piece up on your hem allowance, and you'll notice that your hem will not, your side seam will not be straight. It will kind of come down and then kick out the other way because it will be folding up into an area bigger than what it is if you kept it as is with that descending width. So just make sure and do that so that your hem is trued and it will fold up nice and neat into your skirt when you're done. So there we have it. So I've got my, and again, I've not touched any of the extra outside parts of the pattern here. It's still cut to a size 16, but that's fine because I'm going to be marking the stitching lines. I know I kept saying the seam lines earlier. Yeah, it's a stitching line, so I kept saying seam allowances. Sorry. We're gonna be very loosey-goosey with the seam allowances because our stitching line will be marked, and that, so we'll be really paying attention to where our needle is going and not so much to where the raw edges are lined up, if that makes sense. So yes, I have my stitching line, new stitching line marked, and my waist here, and I'm going to mark my hem, and I'll mark it at the 1.25 inches, but I may play around with that and end up doing up to 2 inches depending on how it fits at the end. Okay, so my pattern is ready to go. I have a piece, it's probably hard to see, but there's a piece of silk organza here. I'll move it so you can kind of see. Woo, there's my silk organza. And I have pressed it so it is nice and flat. And what I am going to do is I'm going to put my wax tracing paper underneath it. Get that all nice and laid flat. And again, I have resources to where you can find this. Susan Calgi sells it on her site. It's kind of hard to find the wax paper, but she does have the large wax paper in like all the colors, the blue, yellow, red, and white. So that would cover all of your bases, definitely. All right, so for the most part, that's all laid down. Now, this is meant to be cut on the fold, which is how this pattern has it. Some people would have you go ahead and make a pattern where it's the full piece, and you could do that if you want, but I'm going to show you a cheater way because that's how I roll. So number one, you want to make sure that your grain line, which your grain line is going to be the fold here on the center front, you want to make sure that it is in fact on grain. That's what I'm trying to say here. And to do that, you can definitely, hold on, I need my measuring, ruler. To make sure that you're on grain, you can measure from the grain line, which is the cut on fold, to the selvage of the fabric, which that's at 13 1/4. Set some weights down. I don't ever pin. And then we're gonna, oh wait, sorry, 13 1/4. My paper underneath here is throwing me off a little. Okay, now we're on the straight of grain here. So I'm going to pin it, or weight it down here. And these are just washers from the hardware store. Inside so I can hit all my seam lines. Okay, now I'm going to take my tracing wheel and I am going to trace out on the stitching line. So I'm tracing out my stitching line. Now when I get to this fold line, I'm going to go ahead and mark it all the way down, and that's going to become my grain line because I'm going to need that line when I am putting this onto the brocade. Also, you want to make sure that you mark all of your notches. And I'm actually going to go ahead and mark the bottom of this pattern piece as well. So I have a notch here at the hip, and I've got my slit, although I think I'm going to raise that, but just so they match on either side. And then I will also know that my grain line is also center front and center back, which will be helpful. I'm actually going to use my ruler since this is a straight line. It'll help me stay on. So I'm going to mark my fold line. So then, once it is all, one side of the skirt is all done, I'm going to flip it over, but we're going to match it up to, and it's going to be hard for you guys to see, but I'm going to match it up to the fold line. Just like that. So I met my seam line for my waist and my fold line. Everything is matching up really well. Everything's gonna fit onto the tracing paper. You can obviously move the tracing paper around if you need it, if you need to. So now I'm just going to continue on, trace it again, but it's been flipped over. Oops. Marking my hem allowance and the bottom of my skirt. Don't need to mark the center, it's already been marked. I'm going to mark my slit, although I just had the slit on one side. I didn't think that through. And then my notch for my hip. Okay, so now I will remove, hopefully you guys can see, and this is the front, no darts, but if I move the pattern piece and this, can you guys see? I don't know if you can or not. But I have the pattern piece is marked, well, you can see it through both sides, but it's been marked on the back. So I have my pattern piece, both sides, that's been cut out. I don't know if you can see that or not. Am I making it worse by It's a faint red line. But now I've got the pattern cut out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut, because I'm going to leave very large seam allowances. So I'm basically just going to leave this silk organza as a big rectangle. So I'm going to cut down, about 2 inches away from the sewing line of this skirt, because I'm going to pin this to the brocade as a square, so that everything can be, you know, nothing is on the bias or anything, so it will pin to the brocade really well, and then when we're hand basting, that'll work. Okay, so now there's my front piece, so I'm going to set it aside, and now I'm going to really quickly do the exact same treatment to my back piece. Alright, so now I have my back pattern piece, full back, and my full front, all on the organza. So all those lines have been transferred, and these are the sewing lines, not the cut lines. So those have all been transferred now to my silk organza. So now I'm actually going to pin it, and we're going to get our brocade cut out. Now we're going to put the pattern pieces aside because we'll actually trace that onto the silk, and I'll use white paper instead of the red because it's a darker color, but we're going to mess with that a little later, so we'll do that next. So I'm just going to put this pattern aside for now because all of our information has been traced to this. So let's go get the brocade and start doing some hand basting.